to share with you all my concept of strategically squishy. I know a lot of y'all are probably wondering, what does strategically squishy actually mean? And you will find out, just not quite yet. Before we get started, I like to read a land acknowledgement. I live in Oklahoma, and in Oklahoma, we try to do our best to acknowledge those ancestors that were here before us, that has made all of the things that we have going on possible. So we would like to acknowledge and give thanks to our ancestors that have made a way for us in this space. We acknowledge those that came before us on this land, the Osage, the Cherokee, Muskogee Creek nations, as well as being the ancestral home of the Caddo and numerous other tribes before the forced removal. Their honor and blood inform our spirit and our work. We also acknowledge the Black Americans who lost life, property, and generational wealth in the 1921 massacre. Their honor and blood inform our spirit and our work. We also acknowledge that November is Native American and Indigenous Heritage Month. Though we lift these communities beyond this month, we give extra recognition to many of these contributions made to the history and the culture of the United States, including important advocacy work, vibrant art, popular foods, and much more. We also acknowledge that this is not a complete and whole list of honor deserved from our many ancestors, and we do lift them up in different times. For this time, we will keep going. Usually I would do like a moment of silence, but we ain't got enough time for that today. So thank you to the rest of the ancestors that may not have been on my list. Let's get this party started. All right, so a little bit about me. Then we're going to go into some leadership styles of strategically squishy. We're going to talk about the concept of strategically squishy. We'll move into an organization change model. And if we have time, we'll talk a little bit about engagement and inclusion. Now, Amber, if you don't mind watching the chat for me, since I have only one screen right now, I'm okay with questions as we go on. So please feel free to pop your questions in as we go through. I've done this presentation many a times, and I generally always still finish within an hour. So we're going to go over what does leadership style, how to understand your own leadership style opportunities, learning how to navigate organization and communication and improved change models, and then how do you leverage strategically squishy principles to improve engagement anywhere. A lot of the work that I do is about people being people. My tagline for my company is better humans make better leaders. So my work is not exclusive to the stuff that you do in your workplace. It could be used in your home, with your family, with your children, with your friends, or with any other human beings that you generally come in contact with. So a little bit about me. There's a lot of things that I do, but in the end of the day, I'm a facilitator. I hate that I just said at the end of the day, because that phrase needs to go away. But in my life, all the things that I do are me as a facilitator. I facilitate conversations as a facilitator in the community. I facilitate community conversations with leaders trying to understand the representatives and the people inside of the community. I facilitate births as I am a doula, and I facilitate connections. I don't get excited about doing networks, but when people tell me about their ideas, I generally always have someone that I can connect them with to make sure that their work actually comes to fruition or that it gets more visibility. All right. Situational leadership, transformational leadership, servant leadership, transactional leadership. But have you heard of authentic leadership? Authentic leadership is one of those styles that doesn't get a lot of play because it takes a lot more introspection and a lot more time on the on the part of the leaders. And thus, a lot of leaders shirk away from authentic leadership. I was in a program a couple months ago and they asked us, do you need to be an authentic leader to do the job or the work that you do? For me, I believe so because I'm trying to help people be better all around instead of just in the workplace. But a lot of people, a lot of my compadres that were also in the program did not agree. So, authentic leadership is something that should really be studied a little bit more. And that's essentially the platform for strategically squishy. Some words for you all. 80 cents, 80 cents. 80% of employees believe that authentic leadership or authenticity improves workplace culture. This is based on a Harvard Business Review study where they found that productivity, innovation, task focus, team synergy, and workplace stress were all impacted by their leaders and their leaders' ability to exhibit authenticity in the work environment. And most of these slides I'll be able to share with you, Amber, so you can to pass it on, but you can look up the study. The link is at the bottom. All right, so let's get into what is authentic leadership. And let's see here. I need to pause the share because there's things I cannot actually see, but I'll keep going. Authentic leadership starts with my model, which is called, well, back that stuff up because that is not what it is. Authentic leadership has nothing to do with me. However, I have developed a model to help you understand more of authentic leadership. And that model is ATV: accountability, transparency, and vulnerability. In my perspective, the work that I've done with a lot of executive leaders, a lot of middle leaders, and a lot of individuals that are still leaders has been around accountability, transparency, and vulnerability. When I have seen executives work in large organizations and excel in one or more of these traits, I have seen their leadership improve and the people receiving them a lot better. So let's start off with accountability. Accountability is one of those sensitive things because a lot of people um, uh, ascribe accountability into more stringent items, just like holding someone accountable, but it doesn't have to be that way. You can still provide accountability and be supportive. Accountability is really about having integrity when you are not in front of others and still being a responsible, holding yourself responsible for the work that you are doing and or the work that others are doing. It's about your own level of discipline, however you exhibit that discipline. And most importantly, it's about your own values and morals, that being really the platform that you stand on. Does your moral compass line up with the work that you do? And is that really what you're exhibiting, whether or not you're around a group of people? That is what accountability is. If a mistake is made, are you able to say, oh, I did have an impact on that. My bad. Yes, I did order too many of this. Or oops, I did make these decisions without asking anyone on my team before I made that decision. Yes, that's accountability. And accountability does have, there is a part of accountability that is reliant upon other people, where you've heard a lot of people say accountability partners and stuff, but it's really first you being accountable to yourself and being able to say, this is the person that I want to be. This is the person that I want to exhibit for others. And this is who I am standing on myself before another person even comes along inside of that. Next is transparency. Transparency is almost synonymous with honesty. So this weekend, I was doing a strategic planning session, and the group wanted to put the value as honesty. And I said, well, I like honesty, but I can walk around honest all day, but how does that really help me in the organization? I prefer the word transparency. And they were like, well, you can be transparent and not be honest. No, you can't. Transparency is about showing up without the veil on top of you, the veil being on top of you. It's your actions being above board, the work that you're doing being visible, having your own awareness, but also having organizational awareness in order to make sure that everyone in the circle is informed and is being consistent. Now, let's get this straight. A lot of us work in sensitive areas. A lot of us might be in HR. A lot of us may have to make decisions that aren't able to be shared at all levels of the organization with all people. That's fine. Transparency, the value that I'm asking for you to exhibit here in transparency is testing that. Do I have to share it with everyone, or am I able to share it? Yes, some of us have to sign NDAs about decisions that we're making in the organization, but up to what point can we share more information? Transparency may even just be about the day-to-day decisions that we have to make in the organization. Are we showing are we showing our work? You know, back in the day when you had to do elementary math and your teacher was like, okay, you can put the answers here, but you have to show your work. Transparency is more about showing your work that you get to the decision-making process instead of just going, boom, here's a decision and we done. Employees and people in your life need to understand more of your decision-making process and not just the decision at the end. This is a part of andragogy, which is how do adults learn? How do adults attain knowledge? Moving forward, vulnerability. Vulnerability is my favorite. You're going to probably hear me say things that are my favorite like 3 times, but vulnerability is my favorite because it is the most, I feel like it's the most sensitive. And without vulnerability, you aren't able to be accountable to yourself and to others, and or transparent to yourself and others. So vulnerability is about being present, showing up with your cards in your hands, not being those people that play Uno and keep their cards under the table, but keeping your cards above the table and being like, here's where we are. Exposure of your own values, morals, thoughts, ideas. Again, being accountable to the things that you have said and the things that you are doing. You are able to now kind of see how all 3 of these roll into each other. And then, of course, humanity, honoring someone else's humanity and you honoring your own, and then them returning that honor is helpful in vulnerability. And also, vulnerability is the hardest of these 3 traits to move forward in as a leader. My personal vulnerability story was, I just used to be very shut off, very much I can do everything by myself, very much it's me or the highway, et cetera, et cetera. And when I got pregnant with my son, I realized that wasn't going to work. So my vulnerability journey started about 19 years ago. And as I moved through grad school and I moved into corporate America and I worked in a couple of organizations, I began to practice vulnerability more and more because I was realizing that holding all of these things inside of me and trying to be the one that can do all of the things in the workplace was not working. And as leaders, it's also probably not working for you. Vulnerability is a great tool that also works hand in hand with delegation and with trusting your employees. Questions, comments, or concerns before we move on?
As of right now, I don't see anything in the Q&A box or the chat.
All right, thank you very much. Authentic leadership is strategically squishy. So as you can see, we're getting a little closer to what is the definition of strategically squishy. Now, I want y'all to prepare yourself because in a few seconds, I'm going to ask you, it may be the next slide, I'm going to ask you, what is your idea of what strategically squishy is. And I would love to hear those, but also if you want to, you can pop it into the chat. And if you want to do that right now, that's cool too. Oh, see, I told you. Okay. So what is strategically squishy? Anybody have any thoughts that they want to share on what strategically squishy is? You can share. I believe they can only share in the chat, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Share in the chat what your idea of strategically squishy is. And I'll pause to see if I see anything coming up. Being intentionally vulnerable. Okay. Thanks, Pam or Pamela. Let me get at least one more in the chat. I can hold out. I'm a real good waiter on that. At least one more person put their definition, what they think strategically squishy is, in the chat. Amber, you might have to put your version in there. Oh, okay. Carla says the idea of strategically squishy to me is to use various tools to navigate situations with intention. I believe it's intentionality, but intentionally and value. Okay. The idea of strategically squishy. Yes, I love it. Anybody else? Yes. Okay. Intentionality. No problem. Thanks, Carla. All right. Anybody else before we move forward? Thanks, Carla and Pamela. All right. We're going to go ahead and keep going. So, strategically squishy is actually, it is, let me see here. It's like Play-Doh. Okay. Here I have some Play-Doh. I've got a pink. Oh, both of these colors are so similar, you might not even see. This is an orange. Strategically squishy is being able to get, this is your employee, this is your person, the Play-Doh out of the container. Anyone that has ever bought fresh Play-Doh knows it takes a while to get this out of the container. Prior to y'all getting on here, I was working that out without showing Amber what I was doing, but trying to work these Play-Dohs out of here. So strategically squishy is the art of understanding, and the definition will come up on the screen in just a moment, but it's the art of being able to get someone out of their shell, working them through, bringing them to the team, allowing them to take their own shape, whichever shape that is. Today it's going to be a circle, and then stacking them together like a team where you're actually going to build something. So it's basically like playing with Play-Doh, because human beings are very squishy. They have thoughts and feelings. Even those people that tell you they don't have thoughts and feelings and they don't care, they just want to do the work, they also have thoughts and feelings, because that what they're articulating is thoughts and feelings. Being able to take those people and give them organizational structure, giving them a job to do so that they start to take shape, and then putting them together so that you start to form a team. And with this team, you can start to make new shapes. You can start to make new work. So strategically squishy is just like working with Play-Doh. The official definition that I have drafted for you all: the art of understanding individuals, their needs, their wants, and talents, leveraging those to maximize connection for all parties, belonging, engagement, and performance. So very close to what Pamela and Carla were saying in the chat. Just like Play-Doh, you don't want the people in your life, your employees, to dry out. And if you don't engage with them and you don't work to understand them, that's what's going to happen. Let's keep rolling. Unless there's any questions or comments. Y'all keep putting stuff in the chat if you want to. All right. Sounds amazing. So how do I get started? That's a common question that people ask me when I start talking to them about strategically squishy. Well, I actually turn it back to you and I say, how do you adjust this? How do you adjust quarterly performance? And I'm gonna need to hear at least one person in the chat put, how do you adjust quarterly performance? And I'll wait for you. Just gonna put my Play-Doh back in its little buckets. I need one person to post in the chat, how do you adjust quarterly performance? Providing more frequent feedback. Ooh, very good, Heidi. Thank you very much. Anyone else have an idea on by asking the employees questions and getting their feedback? I really, really love these answers. I have actually not ever received those answers, and those are actually quality answers. What I was gauging, or what I was trying to get to, though, is defining the problem and setting the goals. Defining where we need more work and then setting goals. And that feedback is actually going to help us in defining the problems to set goals. So I offer the problem solving method in how do you start being more strategically squishy? You might start off with, like what Heidi and Carla said, defining the problem by asking your employees or the people in your life, what is it that needs to be worked on? Then you're going to generate some ideas. You're going to implement those ideas, and then you evaluate those ideas to determine if it's even working. If you find out that it's not working, you do the whole process again. Now, this is a very diced down version of the problem solving method, but I've also given you a link here that you can go to understand even deeper. There's more levels in between each of these that can help you to understand the problem solving method even more. So now I want us to get started on our own understanding of strategically squishy for our own leadership styles. This was objective number 1. And I want to give you some time to identify 1 or 2 goals to improve your own strategically squishy leadership. So you're going to take a minute and you're going to use these mindful questions to generate goals for improving your leadership. The mindful questions are on the screen. You do not have to post in the chat, but I would love if anyone would put down a goal that they may have that came from utilizing these mindful questions. First, start off with thinking, what is the strategically squishy value that you need to work on? Was it accountability? Is it transparency? Or is it vulnerability? How are you demonstrating now? Where might you demonstrate this in your continual leadership? What environment have you already noticed you're doing very well in? Or what environment might you want to work to improve in? What project, if you have any projects at work that you're like, oh, I got this one person that I work with and I know I am not leveraging their talents and I am not focused on their belonging or engagement, that might be an opportunity for you. And is there someone that you think of that could support you as you practice these new skills? Accountability is just authoritarian without support. And so we always try to make sure that as we're holding others accountable, we are offering support. And as you're developing your own strategically squishy leadership, you also need that support. So take about 30 seconds, and I've got my little timer here, to think about 1 or 2 goals that you might be able to improve on in your strategically squishy leadership. Again, we will not be sharing unless you want to. You're welcome to put in the chat, and that'll be awesome. And again, if you have any questions while we're going forward, please feel free to put that in the Q&A section or in the chat. We're going to move forward. Some more words. I love dropping random words into my presentations. And also Shirley Chisholm, if you don't know who she is or was my most favorite person from history, please feel free to give her a good Google. The words from Shirley Chisholm. I know that millions of Americans from all walks of life agree with me that leadership does not mean putting the ear to the ground to follow public opinion, but to have the vision of what is necessary and the courage to make it possible. And this is a great transition to the next part where we're going to be covering the organizational change model. And the organizational change model that I use here is AAA plus A. Again, this is a very small tidbit. I don't go through the whole entire model here for you. And this is also a model that I developed myself. And it is all about organization and change. So as you are working with the people in your team, your department, your organization, or even the people in your life is your husband, your wife, your partner, your children, your family members. This is a useful tool to practice change. And I came up with this because there's so many change models out there and they're so complicated. I like giving people 1, 2, 3s. I like giving people alliteration. I like giving people nuggets that they can walk away with and go, oh, I can use that tomorrow. It doesn't take me a whole piece of notebook paper for me to write this model out and to understand it. So let's start with awareness. The first A is awareness. And awareness is really about your communication with others in your team. Communication builds connection. In the awareness phase of the AAA plus A model, you are not only sharing, but you're listening. And when you are doing that listening from your team, getting that feedback, understanding surveys, that's really how you start to build connection with people. And if you're using this as an organization change model and you're working on a project, there are several questions that you need to be able to answer and to garner information from your team and or colleagues. You want to let them know, hey, we're working on a solution to a project. This team has been developed in order to make sure that this problem gets solved in a cross-functional way. We've come up with solution X so that we can fix the problem. Here is solution X. What are your thoughts on solution X? Again, you're sharing what is the process, what are the steps, what are the things that you've done to get there, and then you're allowing the team to provide feedback. Now, everyone's feedback is not always going to be useful. It's real. Keep it real though. Let the people in the organization, in your friends, family, whatever area you're using this, know that you received the feedback, you played it out, and you said, thank you for your feedback. Here are some solutions that we heard from you that actually work. We are going to try to implement these. These others didn't work, and give it a couple of reasons as to why some of those things didn't work. That's all about the awareness phase. When it comes into the action phase, there's 2 levels to the action phase. There's the planning part and there's the implementation part. Again, you're trying to engage as many people in this process as possible. Here I wrote, engage all voices. Definition of all is literally whatever you can afford to include. So all levels, all teams or departments, all backgrounds, some people that come from engineering, some people that come from manufacturing, or some that come from the science place. but you're doing your best to engage all voices so that it's clear that your decision-making process is not happening in a box. Again, there's the planning phase and the implementation phase. If you have a group in the planning phase, there needs to be some trickle down of those people in the implementation phase so the project continues to go on. And the last part, which we've talked about several times today, accountability. Accountability is understanding how are we measuring success in this? How are we keeping our leaders and ourselves accountable? What's our cadence for check-ins and for progress? And in this piece, feedback is fuel. Having a clear cadence of when statuses and reports and meetings are occurring is helpful for everyone's awareness so that they know, oh, this is what's taking place, and they can make their own decisions if they want to provide more feedback or if they're good with what y'all got going on. Leading with curiosity. This is more about the feedback model. There's a lot of feedback, well, not a lot, there's a few feedback models out there. And the way that I work with feedback is making sure that there's an opportunity for questions to be asked. Yes, it is a two-way conversation. Yes, you already may walk into the meeting knowing exactly what you're going to say, but you don't want the other person on the table to feel as though they are being berated or they don't have an opportunity to share what's on their mind. Because when you're giving feedback without listening to the other person in the situation, that's more opinion-based than it actually is feedback. Invite that other person into the conversation. Working with that person is going to be a lot better than you just going, hey, you don't do this well, that doesn't go well, the project failed, et cetera, et cetera. So lead with curiosity. Ask questions. Hey, we just wrapped up the Butterfinger project, and I'd like to know, how do you feel the Butterfinger project went? Allow that person to answer. Allow that person to give some thoughts and some actual feedback, and then go, I agree with that, or I disagree with that. But also, I noticed that this didn't get accomplished. It's not the sandwich model of feedback, but it's a more inclusive and a much more deliberate working with model than the sandwich model. And as you can see, even this is still a circular cycle, because it's important to notice that none of these models that we're talking about today, a part of being strategically squishy is not having a linear thought process. It is very cyclical. It is something that is continuous. It is something that can be used consistently at any parts of the process to make sure that all are able and along that journey. And again, all is as many as we possibly can, because we're not always going to have 100%. I'll pause for any questions, comments, or concerns.
I don't see anything in the Q&A box or in the chat box.
Okay. If you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. This is way more fun for me if you all interact as well. So feel free to put any thoughts into the chat box. All right, here are some, biscuits. Here are some common barriers to strategically squishy leadership. If we were in the room together, I would likely ask, how many of y'all have heard of white dominant culture norms or dominant culture expressions? That is where this comes from. This study down in the corner, adapted from Dismantling Racism, was done to define what are dominant culture characteristics specifically in the workplace that are keeping people from feeling included and feeling like they have a sense of belonging in the workplace. And there's 15 characteristics. I don't have them all on the screen because I do want you to go look this workbook up because I love this tool. It lists what is the dominant culture expression, and then it lists some characteristics that you might see, and then it even lists how you might combat that. And for folks that are in HR, folks that are in diversity leadership, that's really helpful to make this more understandable to people that are in the decision-making process and may or may not have control of the culture of the organization. For me, when I'm doing the presentation to those decision makers, I call these dominant culture expressions because characteristics are generally things that stick with you, right? Those are things that people can always kind of look forward to you, but expressions are things that can come and go. And so it's important that we don't cast this like spell of you are perfectionism, you are a power hoarder. No, you participate in perfectionism or you perpetuate perfectionism. You have expressed complexity threat in the workplace. You have a monomind mindset right now in this area, and I'd like to help you through that. But these are moments in time, and these are not exclusive to white people in the organization or people in power. These are things that are experienced and demonstrated by all people, specifically in corporate cultures, because that's what's been told as success. And that's what's been told as the way to go. So before I get into questions on this, I see some questions. So I'm going to go ahead and answer those. Is monomind mindset, single-mindedness, tunnel vision type characteristics? So great question. Yes. So monomind is like, all right, so my identity. You look into this camera, you probably like, boom, that's a Black woman. Boom, that's a young Black woman. Boom, that's a woman that is teaching us about, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that is the box that you expect me to perform in. You sometimes may put monomind is all about being that label and people expecting you to show up in that way instead of honoring all the intersectionality and the dimensions that make you a human being. I'm actually Black and Latina. I'm actually queer. I'm not as young as I may look. And I actually don't specify that I do DEI work. I do organizational culture work. But if you look at those things and you make all your decisions about me based on those characteristics that you see and or experience, that's a monomind mindset. Even more where people are going like, oh, they're an accountant, so they're going to definitely love these very structured, stringent activities. They're not the ones that want to go jump out of the plane or want to go do anything adventurous. That's also a demonstration of the monomind mindset. Thanks, question, Pam. Oh, okay. Thanks, Pam. All right. Any other of these common barriers to strategically squishy leadership that you see that you're like, I don't know exactly what that is? Because like I said, there's 15 of them, and I picked the ones that specifically can show up as you're developing your leadership style and you're going through organ change in culture development. But if you have any questions on those, this is a good time. And again, the name of the study is Dismantling Racism, and it's a workbook. It's so good. It's so good. Okay. Thanks for that question about monomind. Oh, I got another one. What examples are of cultural avoidance? So cultural avoidance can be either or. It could be me avoiding my own culture. And it could also be you in the workplace avoiding my culture. So doing your best to get me to shift back into that mono mind, what label you have me on, or me myself trying to show up in that one way, but avoiding whatever may be a definite of my culture. So some easy examples are like um, people that may come from the Middle East, any of those countries, or African countries, but not trying to show up in what they feel is their strong religious attire at work, because it may be a specific day, or their foods, where they may tame down the foods that they eat in the cafeteria at work because they don't want to answer questions, or they don't want to draw attention around that. Or it could be even as deep as a Black person or a Latino person that shirks away from the other Black and Latino people in the workplace because they don't want to be seen as the minoritized groups or the underrepresented groups. So there are so many levels to cultural avoidance. That's again that side, and then of course it could be on the other side where you might have a white leader talking to you, and they may say, "Oh, you're not like the other ones." Ugh, I know we've all had those moments, but just avoiding, like acknowledging that your culture is present. Okay, I see that. Facts. Listen, let me tell y'all the one word that gets me going: articulate. I cannot have someone. I have so much triggers from my previous CEO saying, "You are so articulate, but I don't understand you." Okay, thanks for that. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and move on. I think we're almost at the end. But keep putting those questions and stuff in the chat. All right. Yeah, we are almost at the end. So the last objective that we had for this session was, how do you improve engagement now? Why did I use the word engagement? Because in my work and my research, I have found engagement and inclusion are essentially the same thing. One just has a little taint on it because it's been tied to diversity for so long that people look at it like a little bit taboo. And so engagement is why is the word that I choose to use. I also have another presentation that I call how to get executives to eat broccoli. And that's what it's the understanding of engagement and inclusion basically being sisters, and one being a little bit like Cinderella, the dirty sister that has to clean the house. She doesn't get to go out to the ball and wear all the cool clothes. I see something in the chat. I'm looking at that. Somebody put their triggers in. How do you know? You see, I couldn't even finish reading it because yes, I have had that. The what Pamela wrote in the chat is, how do y'all, basically when someone is approaching her and being like, how do you know all this information? But this information is paramount to the work that she does and being a great leader. And why would I not know that information? Yes. And you sharing that actually reminds me of me doing an executive session once, C-suite level session, and I went through the whole session, and it was like level one of how do we make a better culture for our employees. And by about 75% 75% way through, the CFO goes, "This is just like leadership concepts." And I was like, bing, bing, bong. Congratulations. You get a gold star for the day. Yes. The fundamentals of having a diverse equitable, and inclusive environment are the exact same leadership principles that we have been teaching forever. But because we put that label on it, you think that it's completely different and you have to walk outside of yourself in order to do it. And so that's really what the catalyst for me, including engagement in my sessions like this, is so that people can see that inclusion and engagement are the same thing. So these are just 5 quick tips on how to improve your engagement and inclusion. And they are also based upon, so I got kind of the premise from this group that I was working with, but I also got this from the study of andragogy, which is how do adults learn? What do adults need? And the basics is adults need the WIFM. What's in it for me in order to learn? Adults also need varied styles because we are so deep in ourselves that some of us only learn audio. Some of us only learn visually. Some of us only learn hands-on by practicing. And so if you really want to have a successful session, you really want to make sure you mix up as many of those learning styles as possible so that it's not just all lecture, it's not just always you talking, because that's really how you're going to get people to walk away with some knowledge. And so the same thing with an improving engagement. Now, this is more for like if you're in the awareness phase, or maybe if you're hosting a meeting, or you just want to share some information with people. You always want to make sure that in the welcome, you include the why. Why do I have to be here for this meeting? Why do I have to listen to you right now? And it needs to be as close to the front as possible. I would say even before you do any of those fun little icebreakers or getting to know you type things. And that's what number 2 is. Number 2 is an element of connection. They want to know who is in the room. Even though I told y'all at the beginning, even those adult people that say they don't want to be bothered with nobody, they want to be in the corner, they still want to know who they got in their environment so they can either stay away from them or learn how to work with them. So connection moments are super important. So one of these groups that I work with, we do a check-in question. We do a check-in question every single time we have a meeting. And that check-in question requires you to have thought to determine how deep you want to go. But no matter what, you're going to share a part of yourself, even if you don't go deep. And then, of course, bringing it back to the purpose. I'm not coming to a meeting just because I have to come to a meeting. What is the goal? What are we working towards? Intention. How are we doing it? Are we really making a good go at it? Or are we really just doing some silly shit? And then the close. Bring it back to that why. Again, y'all see me in my cycles. Bring it back to that why. Make sure that when they're walking out of that meeting, they got some connection to whatever the heck fire that they just talked about. And even maybe giving them, I mean, we always do, well, I don't know what y'all do, but I always do like next steps at the end of my meetings to make sure that everyone is aware of what is the accountability measures, what's the cadence. But it's important for people to know if there's something that they need to do. You want to have a meeting that is a meeting in the meeting. You don't want, we all have been a part of those meetings after the meeting where we'll say Bertha has invited everyone in the accounting department to a meeting, and then she talks for 45 minutes and then the meeting's over. There's going to be pockets of conversations after that meeting talking about Bertha, talking about Bertha's style, talking about whatever the heck y'all might have missed in the meeting. Try to encourage those meetings to take place in the meeting. And if you start to add a little bit of these steps, you'll improve your engagement. And then also I challenge you, go look at the elements of engagement and the elements of inclusion. The elements of engagement, there's about 7 characteristics of engagement, and there's about 5 of inclusion. And when you lay them on top of each other, it's basically the same thing. So very important, very cool information to go learn. All right. I would love feedback from this session. I'm pretty sure Amber's going to send you something too, but please feel free to scan this code, and it's like a 2-question survey, maybe 3, that would really, really help me to improve and or add some more stuff, or, just give your girl good feedback, because I would like that. We are at the point for questions, comments, concerns, snarky remarks, anything. I'm open.